This is Richard Kusiolek with GMCstream, and we really have a great opportunity to speak with Bohdan Yaremenko, who was a diplomat. He'll tell a little bit about himself, and he's chairman of the Maidan of Foreign Affairs. He's an expert on foreign policy. Bohdan, thank you very much for this interview. I really appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, sure. Basically, I'm a former career diplomat who resigned from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during the so-called Revolution of Dignity of last year. Prior to my resignation, I used to work for 20 years for Ukrainian diplomatic corps, and my professional career on the different stages was including the positions of vice consul and consul in New York, the position of director of US and Canada desk in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the position of director of the Department of the Western Hemisphere countries at the MFA of Ukraine, the position of protocol chief for Prime Minister of Ukraine, also the position of Consul General of Ukraine in Edinburgh, first Deputy Director for Foreign Policy Staff of President Yushchenko, and Consul General of Ukraine in Istanbul, and representative of Ukraine to the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization.
Well, this is really very exciting. I think with your depth of understanding, I think you can give us some answers to some critical questions. They may not be extremely critical, but they're really important question points. So one of the questions that I had was really on foreign policy. There's a couple questions. And the first one, if you don't mind me reading it, is what effects have the signing of the Treaty on Partnership and Cooperation with the European Union and the cooperation agreement with NATO occurred since their signing? Anything
that's something that we need to clarify. Are you talking about the agreements that have been signed in the late 90s, or by the agreement with EU you mean the most recent agreement?
Most recent, yeah.
Well, but it should be clarified that it's not the cooperation agreement.
Okay.
This is association treaty.
Okay, good point.
And which is basically the much more extended stage of cooperation between entities like EU and country like Ukraine. So it is the profound, stage of the development of Ukraine's foreign policy. It was quite a dramatic story because basically the whole story with the revolution of 2013-2014 started with demonstration in support of this treaty after President Yanukovych, week prior of the signing ceremony, declined to do so, and declared that since that moment he would be more concentrated on Russia as the source of additional economic and financial assistance for Ukraine. So it inspired the protests on the streets of Kiev and other cities of Ukraine, which later were brutally basically stopped by the police, and it made me as Consul General of Istanbul to make a statement that I cannot support the activities, the brutality of Ukraine police preventing the demonstration in such a brutal way, so I was immediately called back. But basically it was just a small part, of course, of their further developments in the form of revolution, which ended with a terrible disaster on the Maidan, with the massive killings of unarmed protesters. And later on, I think the whole situation ended with the war with Russia. So for this reason, the signing of this treaty was the key element and key demand of the protesters in Kiev during the revolution of last year. It is the turning point because it creates a very special moment for Ukraine, declaring clearly that since the signing of this treaty, we would be fully concentrated on the European Union as the entity we would like to join in some time. But it's not just a political declaration, because this association agreement is also, it consists of two parts. The political part, which making Ukraine to be clearly affiliated in a political way with the European Union, and the trade part, which provides Ukraine with the opportunity to reform the industry, which provides Ukraine with a clear reform plan and strategy to prepare ourselves to their basically EU, the full EU integration. And of course, it providing us additional possibilities in trade with the European Union, which we already exploring and trying to develop. So it's an important, probably the most important event in the Ukraine history, maybe not just in the most recent history of independent Ukraine, but probably since the 1655 agreement with Moscow Tsar, when we signed the union or the military union treaty. So it's probably we hope so in Ukraine, that it's a turning point when we clearly defined our strategy for future. As for the NATO, of course, we're still using the agreement which was signed a couple of years ago. Clearly, right now, I'm not talking about the success of the story, but basically, since the signing of the agreement of cooperation with NATO, Ukraine is clearly reforming its military forces in coherence with the criteria of NATO. So it's also important. It's important that our agreement on cooperation with NATO includes not just the military sphere, but also economy, judicial sphere, and political sphere, the sphere of democracy. So it means that this agreement with NATO is another important practical mechanism of changing Ukraine and changing Ukraine the way that it would become the modern democracy. So those two agreements are very important and probably the most important foreign policy developments for Ukraine.
Well, you know, I really appreciate your candor and your depth of knowledge. It's pretty obvious to me. Let's go on to the next question here. The CIS establishes a free trade zone among Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. And is this still in effect? There was agreement, i.e. agreement on the common economic space of CIS. That's what CIS.
Well, CIS basically is an entity including much more countries besides those that mentioned by you. So you still need to name Azerbaijan, Armenia as the part of CIS, also Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. So those countries, Asian countries, they are also the members of the CIS, including Moldova and Belarus, of course. Yes, it is basically, it's also a crucial moment for Ukraine's foreign policy and Ukraine's the process of finding the foreign policy positioning or international positioning of our country. Because the history of creation of the CIS is quite strange, and also the Ukrainian participation in the CIS is quite strange. So the CIS was created the same day as the Soviet Union collapsed. Basically, the leaders of Russian Federation, Boris Yeltsin, of Ukraine, Mr. Leonid Kravchuk, and Belarusian leader, they met in Minsk to declare that Soviet Union is dissolved. So there is no more such a country as Soviet Union. But because they were afraid that the process of dissolution might be quite painful for those republics, they decided to create an entity which would be somehow coordinating the process, as Ukrainian politicians has used to say, of the civilized divorce within the Soviet Union. In reality, it turns that for Russia, and they declared clearly right after this meeting, that they consider this mechanism to be not just the divorce mechanism, but in opposite, the mechanism of further integration on the territory of the former Soviet Union. Ukraine wasn't consistent in her desire to be a member of this organization, although we created it. We have never signed the statutory documents, and by this we have never applied for the full membership in this organization. But what has happened later sounds even more stranger than the previous story. So Ukraine, not being a full-fledged member organization, was paying the contributions, annually contributions to this organization, and was participating in all of the bodies of this organization, which was institutionalizing gradually from year to year. And but still, Ukraine was participating in a very strange way in the activities of the CIS, being very deliberate of what is being signed by Ukraine, what kind of initiatives were supported, and which were not supported by Ukraine. So Ukraine was fully concentrated on the economic agenda of this organization, trying not to sign or to participate in anything of political nature. So with this in mind, we must understand that from one point of view, Ukraine wasn't consistent because from now it looks like that after the collapse of Soviet Union, Ukraine, it would be much smarter, a wiser move for Ukraine to go west immediately. And to declare that no integration to East is longer an option for Ukraine, that we must basically choose our identity, new identity, or find our new identity, and to reform the country the way which would be in line with our decision. But in reality, we were slowly reforming ourselves to become a democracy, but still participating in the organization which was used by Russian Federation as another instrument of integration and creating something new for Russia.
Right.
At the same time, Ukraine has effectively used this organization to sign different instruments which proved to be instrumental for Ukrainian citizens, like, let's say, agreement on recognition of their diplomas of the higher and middle and secondary education. So it's after the collapse of Soviet Union, of course, all those family ties between people in different republics didn't disappear overnight, and the people were traveling, were changing the countries, and it was quite useful. Also, all kind of different agreements of this kind, of social protection, were also signed. And so the agreement of the free trade zone, of course, it was the key priority for Ukraine's participation in the CIS. Also, all other republics, probably with only exception of Russia, were quite pushy in preparing this and signing this agreement. But of course, since the very beginning of the process, Russia has decided to create a lot of exemptions from this agreement, including the most crucial parts of and products for our trade, oil and gas. Right. So. Also, there were other exceptions which, of course, were against the interest of Ukraine's industry, like, let's say, the trade with their pipes, industrial pipes, and so on, so on, so on. So those products that were mostly provided by Ukraine and other post-Soviet republic were included by Russia, a lot of them, into the exception, the list of exceptions from the free trade zone. So. In reality, this free trade zone has never been enabled as the real free trade zone agreement, but of course it's provided some opportunities for Ukrainian businesses and of course businesses in other CIS countries. But till probably from the beginning of the recent century, the situation in a very evolutionary way was changing the way that European Union was becoming a more and more important part of Ukrainian foreign trade. So, and prior to the war with Russia, I believe European Union was already the most important trade partner for Ukraine, while the share of Russian Federation and other CIS countries was slowly decreasing. And of course, this process is developing the same way, but even the temps, of course, are increasing. So Russia is still important for Ukrainian foreign trade for simple reasons. So we still don't have any other alternative for, let's say, gas supplies. Natural gas is still provided by Russian Federation, besides some really important actions undertook by recent Ukrainian government to decrease our dependency on the supplies. And of course, let's say for Ukrainian nuclear energy, we're still using the supplies of the fuel from Russian Federation, and also there were some very important activities undertook some 10-15 years ago with the assistance of the US government to create an alternative to qualify nuclear fuel on the Ukrainian nuclear power stations, and to create the situation with then some other foreign countries might be technically able to enter this market. But still, it is still a desired situation, so it has never happened. Hopefully, the situation with war with Russia would push Ukraine to make even more concrete and definite steps in this direction. So, again, sorry for speaking for too long, but
no, I don't really think so. This is very important.
It's not an easy question to answer. But from my perspective, right now, this is purely political question. Ukraine must make. So we didn't make our choice in the year 1991 after the collapse of Soviet Union. Right now, should we choose to go, and we didn't, we really did it. So we choose European Union as the primarily target and strategic target of our integration and further development. So it means that no other options should be really taken into the account. So although we shouldn't be withdrawing from the free trade zone with CIS countries, I believe Ukraine should declare that we will not longer be participating in any activities of this institution, and we must turn west, finding some opportunities in European Union, in the countries of Africa, Asia, Latin America, of course, if it's possible in the United States and Northern America, but I believe it is in the best Ukraine's interest to cut the trade with Russia to the maximum possible extent for very simple reasons. Russia depends to the small number of countries which has never considered the trade as their pure economic activity. No matter what you trade in with Russia, sooner or later they would try to benefit politically of your dependence. So I believe politically it would be much healthier for Ukraine to get as far from Russian Federation economically and in the sense of trade as possible. Of course, saving those items in our trade, which we basically cannot survive without. So like, let's say for a moment, it's the supplies of nuclear fuel, or let's say the gas. Still the cooperation in the sphere of gas, it's something we depend not just on Russia, but also on the European Union, because we are still feel a lot of pressure from European countries not to stop, because Ukraine is still the most important transit route of Russian gas to European Union. So it means by making our decisions, we must take into account the interest of our friendly countries located west to our border.
Well, you know, that's very comprehensive. You know, I'll just say a little thing on the side here. I think that the Ukrainian government should get you involved because your level of knowledge and wisdom from this conversation is pretty obvious to me. So I think you're answering a lot of my questions in a large way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at a few questions here that maybe we can just keep it to maybe two, okay?
Sure.
So talking about foreign economic activities, let me ask you this question. What of Ukraine's defense aerospace industry? Will Ukraine leverage its space technologies for future economic growth and foreign exchange?
That's a difficult question to answer. We're experiencing the large number of problems in this area. So the reason is quite simple. Ukrainian aerospace industry was almost, probably for more than 90%, oriented on Russian Federation. And of course, this is kind of cooperation which mostly directed on their defense or military aims. And of course, waging a war with Russian Federation, you cannot supply a Russian military which is killing you,
right,
which would be unnatural and unwise. So Russian Federation is dependent on Ukrainian services in the sphere of their supporting their strategic nuclear arsenal. So most of their solid fueled rockets or missiles, ballistic missiles, are being produced by Ukrainian, huge Ukrainian plant or facility located in Dnipropetrovsk, Yuzhmash. And of course, those ballistic missiles need to be serviced within or according to the plan, and of course, their decision of Ukraine to withdraw from this cooperation might cost a lot for even for their strategic nuclear balance, and this is something that creates a lot of problems for Russian Federation. But of course, we don't have any other, or in most of their situations, we don't have any other customers but Russian Federation. So, and let's say just some, to the best of my understanding, 30,000 people are working on their facility in Dnipropetrovsk. The same situation with the, let's say, aircraft building industry. So most of Ukrainian aircrafts designed here were produced jointly with Russian Federation. I mean the family of Antonov aircraft. Including those famous Mria Dream, the heaviest cargo plane in the history, capable of carrying the space launcher on top of this, and famous Ruslans, which are designed by Ukrainian design bureau Antonov, but were produced jointly by Ukraine and Russian Federation. So it means that Ukraine facing the significant dilemma, first of all, how to deal with their legal and economic consequences of a decision to break our cooperation with Russian Federation, because a lot of technical documentation belongs to Russian Federation, a lot of rights to some parts and products belong to Russian Federation, and of course it also depends on our ability to find the new customers. Which is not an easy, of course, task for a country like Ukraine, experiencing significant problems in the financial sphere without a strong banking system. So for now, and of course, the collapse of those industries would mean not just a disaster for economy, for scientific development of Ukraine, but would also can lead to their significant social problems in the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine, located closer to Russian Federation. So unrest, a lot of jobless and high-tech engineers, highly educated and qualified workers. Of course, it would create a lot of problems with the leakage of personnel to some other countries. So this is the dilemma which, of course, Ukraine have no other choice but to rely on our friends on resolving it. So, and hopefully European air and space authorities and in particular United States might be a good part of this solution. But again, the future of those industries in Ukraine, I would say for now, is not clear.
Okay, well, of course I know that they are working with NASA, and of course, matter of fact,
it's an issue. Sorry for interrupting you. It's an issue of of the scale of the cooperation, because so far we were involved, let's say, with a sea launch, with some smaller projects, but those projects are not enough, to get those plants working on their heart at the maximum level of their capacities. You see, so because we must keep in mind the social outcomes of the possible developments, or let's say our inability to resolve the situation, how to make them work in those plants, and how to save the jobs over there.
Okay. Again, I'm always impressed by your depth of knowledge and your absolute honesty. I have one final question, and then we'll do a wrap-up summary. What foreign policy direction can Ukraine take in the next 3 years to promote a democratic, peaceful, and prosperous future?
This is another dilemma. So far, Ukraine don't have any strong foreign policy strategy or even the plan. Because of their quite difficult economic situation and internal political problems, Ukraine is not capable so far of conducting the strong and active, proactive foreign policy. At the same time, it looks for me as an expert in this field quite obvious that Ukraine must create a new approach to the foreign policy. And of course, take into account the most recent history of our country and also the fact that we still surrounded partly by the countries which cannot be considered friendly, but also democratic countries like Belarus, like Russian Federation. So we must conduct the value-based foreign policy. Ukraine should make our choice of developing the free society, the tolerant society, not just a key element for our foreign policy or international positioning, but also a part of economic foreign policy agenda. We must get involved in promoting democracy, tolerance, liberal freedoms within the countries located next to Ukraine and probably some other countries on the the territory of the former Soviet Union. So it must become a kind of specialization of Ukrainian foreign policy. Otherwise, we would never be able. Of course, it's not an easy question, and it sounds like in the modern Ukraine we would be immediately accused of exporting the revolution, democratic revolutions, or things like this. But anyway, without a change of the profound change of their nature of ruling regimes in Belarus, Russia Federation, and some other foreign former Soviet countries, Ukraine would never be able to arrange a stable surrounding along her borders. So it means that we have no other choice but to make promotion of democracy and liberal values as the part of our foreign policy agenda. Also, the reason of doing this is that it sounds like, for now, this is also the key element of internal political discussions in Ukraine. So after the Revolution of Dignity, Ukrainians are quite key to create such a society within Ukraine. So creating and developing democratic institutions, liberal values within Ukraine, and modernizing society this way, with the simultaneous promotion of the same values abroad, it can be something which could help us in the foreseen future to get acknowledged by international community and to promote ourselves and our interest. But of course, another difficult dilemma is finding the balance between the pragmatic elements of the foreign policy and the value-based element of those policies, because again, with all of my adherence to the value-based foreign policy, in some situations we are dependent so much on the regimes that I would prefer to be changed as soon as possible. So it means that we still need to continue some relations with them, and the issue of balance becoming very important. Also, it sounds like it will be a dilemma for Ukraine, because very often the markets for Ukrainian, let's say, industries, including military industrial complex that we can find located in Asia and Africa, also in the countries which cannot be clearly called as the democratic and free society. So it is the dilemma which we don't have the solution for now, which is, but still this is the question which we're discussing very hard here. Basically, this organization, the Maidan of Foreign Affairs, this is an NGO, we consider this as to be one of our primary goals, to inspire the discussions and to find, to create the doctrine for Ukraine, the foreign policy doctrine, and to get the whole society involved, because it must be the foreign policy agenda, or let's say the priorities of foreign policy agenda, must be a matter of the national consensus. So this is, we're working on this as the NGO.
Well, you know, it's really exciting talking to you, to be quite candid. And Bohdan, I really want to appreciate your time that you gave us. Impressed with your depth of knowledge. I mean,
well, but I spent 20 years of working for this government, so I was a part of a lot of negotiations.
Yeah.
And so.
You would be the person, I think, that should really be a spokesperson, you know, the person who has the vision. In my opinion.
That's why I'm not returning to the government, because we need to create a vision. They don't have a vision, and they don't have time and resources to create a vision right now. So they're just reacting. And so that's why a lot of people decided to withdraw, to stand aside, to create new entities and new discussion groups, forums, to start work on phrasing the new strategies and politics, with the aim to return back in some time. Because right now this government, it's an unfortunate thing, but it looks like that we're stuck in this situation for another year or two, with a lot of extraordinary elections, with probably a lot of changes of the government, probably some new presidents would be coming. So it's the time to create a strategy. Otherwise, you would stuck in those dilemmas and problems that we're facing right now, and would have no opportunity to think about the future strategy. There are no simple recipes for Ukraine right now. So it looks like that we must first of all understand better the international surrounding of Ukraine, where Europe and basically the globe is moving. How, let's say, the situation would look like in some 15-20 years. And only after this we might be able to analyze what kind of resources we have to spend on the reforms. And because there are some things that probably we should not be even trying to achieve. We should be sacrificing some things in order to, you know, to reach some better results in the future. So, for example, let's say our military. It looks like that we're still preparing to the war that we already lost. So the same.
It's very perceptive. I agree.
Yeah. So you see, so instead we probably need to be fully concentrated on the new arms and new systems that would make us capable in some 10 or 15 years to stop Russian Federation, to create, without the nuclear arms, to create some balance here. That, you see, and in all other spheres, economy, social sciences or reforms, there are also things that cannot be done right now. And instead of trying to work out, and this is exactly what the government is doing, they're trying to resolve unresolvable. So it's time to think carefully about our future, try to phrase the strategy, to see the future of our friends and enemies, and then to create a sort of plan that we might be able to implement.
Well, I have to give you this input. You are a real patriot for Ukraine. That's pretty obvious to me.
Of course.
And your passion and your knowledge is, I think, personally, because you were talking about value sets in foreign policy. I mean, you are a value set within yourself, and I really appreciate it. And it's really been a very exciting time.
But this is the only way for us. It's not just, you know, irrational that I'm stuck in this phraseology, but I'm really keen. So and working for the ministry, because my career started in the United States. And I learned a lot of the American system. So then I spent some time in Britain. So I was working with the Anglo-Saxonic society, let's say, for quite some time, for some 10 years or even more. And of course, more information you're getting, more you see keen you're becoming to implement something of this kind, or to work out a similar strategy for Ukraine. But still, even from the practical point of view, one of the key dilemmas that we're facing right now is the lack of trust, internally and internationally. So, and developing those values is the only way for Ukraine to return trust in the cooperation with our friends, I mean, with the European Union and Americans. Because no matter how effective we would be reforming our industry, if we would, let's say, turn back to authoritarian or some other ways of thinking, it would mean that we will not get enough support and not enough understanding, enough trust. So it's a practical choice of create something value-based. So it must become an agenda for Ukrainian government, society, and we're trying to promote it. Because otherwise we would stuck in our in our past. And it's very difficult, you know, to make next step because we're facing a lot of problems here. But clearly, so the only way forward is to promote liberal values, republicanism, and things of this kind.
Yeah, you have a very positive vision. It's really been, again, I'll say it again, a real joy. Because now I have a whole...
It's a pleasure.
I'm almost... I got your energy flow here. So I really feel excited about everything. So thank you.
Thank you
very much. I
recently moved from another office to this premises, so...
Great, great. Your secretary is very efficient, by the way. This is my first novel.
And also it's been done, you know, so because here the situation with employment here is quite a difficult one. So when I got some funding to create this organization, most of the people would do that. They would invite someone who they know very well, you know, to work for you. So, in being, as you noted, adhering to the values, so I decided to do it in the most transparent way. So, at that time, I was already quite a popular person on the Ukrainian Facebook. So, I placed the announcement that we're looking for a secretary. So, and some 10-15 people went here. So we choose 2 of them, and they're still working, and they're very good, and they were just the students at the time. So they were graduating the university. So we supported 2 students, and right now they are very good colleagues of us, very smart and efficient. So
I think you can kind of build this into a great consulting, whatever your vision is, whatever your business plan is. There's no doubt.
That's difficult, you know, for now, because we have the capacities here, and we have an expertise here. Again, so even during the presidential campaign, we, at the request of the campaign of Mr. Poroshenko, we created a review for them on their possibilities of resolving the security issues, but in their long-term strategy, And we, but again, so they used our report, and basically it was based on the very simple suggestion. So the only way, the practical way forward, is to try to develop relations with the United States and to get the status of the Egypt, let's say.
Right, okay.
In the practical terms, from the point of legislation, there are at least some 9 different possibilities within the American legislation. And your legislation and legislative practices are very flexible in this. So every time your legislators are finding some other way which is up to the point. So, but also the status of the major non-NATO ally was seen by us as the most practical way of getting forward. But we explained them, and it has happened prior to the elections. But when the elections were over and he was inaugurated, so we told them, but please use this strategy. We think that it's real, but you need to work out a plan of restoring the trust. Without the trust, you would never get it in the United States. And the response was from the people that ordered the previous report from us was, but how can we do it with the NGO? You cannot do it for us. It's only the government can do it. Well, that's not the way forward. So I told them, we have a please join us at the presidential administration and work with the President Poroshenko. And my response was, what do you want me to do there? To sign the speeches for him? But, well, you don't need me there. I have an organization. I have the brains here. I have a financing here. So use us. We would start immediately working with the most of the NATO countries here, you know, to develop, to discuss, because we have a significant problems with the counterintelligence, intelligence. Militarily, they cannot trust us. That's clear for us. There is no. If I would be American, I would never sell the weapons into this country. Honestly, telling you. So, but you are NGO. You cannot work. Okay, but so to find the customer, that's the problem here. Those who would order and who would need your job.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the problem with the Ukrainian government. So so far we have Ukrainian business supporting us, and we're doing it just as a fund, providing our expertise to Ukrainian society. But in reality, of course, to develop the agency of the kind that we tell, and we partly see RAND Corporation as the Example, yes.
Well, you know, I interviewed them.
Well, but that's, again, as an example, it's very ambitious. But
I'm saying that maybe I can help you. Because actually I met them in
but
DC.
Because we already working with the Atlantic Council in Washington,
okay.
So we prepared them a report on Crimea,
right.
And we are specializing in Crimea. We understand that Crimea will become the major challenge for our security, identity, defense.
I think personally, from a personal perspective, you should really have a relationship with Rand.
We'll try to do our best.
Experience, good recognition. And they really do a lot of in-depth work, and I think it would be a good relationship. That's kind of
but again, back to your question of the consulting agency. You see, but Rand is partly sponsored by government and it's used by the government.
Of course, it is.
But here, the government is doing nothing, to get new understanding, knowledge. Again, they just reacting, and this is quite disappointing.
Yeah.
See, because we're ready to do it. But anyway, we're trying to assist them because we are arranging a lot of different roundtables here, seminars, inviting people from foreign countries, and of course we are inviting them. And at the beginning they were very suspicious, but right now, even with we have already the reputation of the hardline critics of the President Poroshenko for his Minsk agreement and other international security activities. But because of this reputation, they're starting to attend the meetings. Because they understand
things are fading a little bit.
There is no way of ignoring us anymore.
Right.
But so the people from different intelligence, military, they coming, participating, and they're very glad to have such an opportunity, informal, to meet, to discuss different. But again, it's not enough. It's not enough. Yeah. They must get involved with everyone thinking about Ukraine, doing something with Ukraine. Instead, what they trying to make them to provide them with job opportunities. So if you criticize the president or if you're a volunteer at the front, just will give you the position of advisor to the president. Well, it's good, but maybe those people would better serve you if they would be continuing to do whatever they do, not as the public servants, but as the individuals, private individuals, and bringing you more expertise, more
honesty. Honesty. That's what you bring.
Exactly.
You bring honesty and hope. This is what I say. Definitely.
Well, but
I wish you could come to Silicon Valley. You would be a great speaker there. Because I have a thing called the Ukraine Technology Consortium of Silicon Valley. That's another thing I'm doing. So I'm doing some things with the universities and Stanford. And I mean, the reality in America today is it's the people who have the money are in information technology, and they're in Silicon Valley, and they really heavily influence the government, U.S. government, and so that might be something you could think of, because you would be like a star there. You really just be yourself, and that's something to maybe think about. Well, this is just an idea. I'm just planting an idea,
That's a difficult question for me, a balance of my activities with foreign friends abroad and internal here, because I understand that we must work hard abroad, including the United States, but still we have so many problems here internally, and we need to be fully concentrating on the discussions here and on our work to create something new. That is very difficult, even sometimes to find the time to. But of course, should it would be a practical idea or real invitation, of course, I would be honored to travel there and to become a speaker, to meet with the different people.
There's some senators and Congress people. In other words, I have those contacts.
Probably the beginning of fall this year, because we've been contacted by some Ukrainian organizations in New York and Washington, D.C. that are trying to start the campaign on Crimea. And as we already have a reputation of the major center delivering the Crimea situation and analyzing it, so we will be working with them, and I would probably be traveling to. And basically, a colleague of mine who is doing most of the job with the Crimea, Andrei Klemenko, he was in Washington D.C. just in March, presenting the report on the human rights. But right now we are preparing the report on the militarization of Crimea. So We tried to be active in the United States as well.
Yeah.
We understand, again, I was quite honest on speaking about the United States. And
Sure.
it's a part of my personal also agenda because my daughter was born in New York.
Oh, really?
So I feel myself attached.
You must.
attached.
Yeah. Well, I spent some time in New
America.
York, and I know New York a little bit. It's kind of a dynamic place, isn't it?
Right, it's
Very
probably
dynamic.
the best place to start your career and to make it.
Oh, absolutely.
And within their
How old is your daughter, by the way?
She's 15.
Oh, okay. Wow.
She's 15.
Is this your only child?
No, she's an older one. I have the second one. So my son, Vasil, he was born in Edinburgh. So I have international.
He's got a British accent.
And they all speak Ukrainian, most of the part. So because we left United States when Yaroslava was 3 months old, but she's fluent in English because she started her school in Edinburgh when Vasil was born. But Vasil, of course, it's my trouble. So he's English, but he's trying to get some English in here in Kiev. So, so yes, it was an interesting time.
Okay, excellent. Well, let me not take your time anymore. And I was going to mention something. I'm attending a conference here. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's a group here in Kiev for investment in Ukraine. And they gave me a report, and I'm going to email it to you. You know, this is just between you and I, for your review, because I think it would find it interesting.
It will stay secret.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it would be very interesting. This will give you additional, not that you need additional knowledge, but I think a different perspective.
No, you always need an additional knowledge and information, especially the press. Yes, investors, that's the most important part of the foreign policy agenda and foreign policy reputation.
Well, this group comes out of New York. See, but it's they have an office here.
But of course, I can imagine what they're thinking about Ukraine because we have the same feelings.
Oh yeah. Well, you can read it and see. I mean, you touched some of the interesting points. You know, let me throw one more thing at you, okay? You know, I was down in Kherson, you know, and I was doing a review of their shipbuilding down there, and it is a disaster. It is a complete disaster. I mean, there's nothing going in. There's a little bit of repair work going on. There was so much activity there, and it's amazing to me. I know the South Korean.
It depends on what kind of plant you were visiting, because there are some private plants located there.
Oh yeah, well this
is doing relatively.
This is the SMG group.
SMG, so it's a private group. It's not the government run.
Yeah, this is the guy who's was from Russia, and then he changed to Ukrainian in 2012. And so I met with the manager there. I did a complete review. They showed me everything. And I thought to myself, oh God, I mean, this was such a thriving industry. And shipbuilding, of course, your steel industry was very thriving as well. And I looked at that and I saw a lot of ships, you know, they're still in dock, you know, maybe they ran out of money or something, you know. And
we don't have a problem with the steel and with the bodies.
Yeah.
For ships, but with everything else, including engines. We don't have effective engines, especially from the point of view of fuel consumption, because Soviet Union has never been thinking about the efficiency of the engines.
Oh yeah.
Because they have never experienced the lack of the fuel and oil. Also, it's the part of the general problem with the investment climate in Ukraine. It's very difficult to get some stuff here and then to get it outside, and also corruption. So it cannot be resolved. You see, it's not just about with the shipbuilding. The same you ask about the aircraft construction. It's the same. Also, we have. Should you be able to visit our facilities producing, let's say, the engines for the nuclear and or other power stations in Kharkiv? It's unbelievable. Also, let's say the battle tank producing capacities that we have in Kharkiv, and a lot of other things. But it is about the general investment climate. So no business infrastructure, no good banking, and no investment funds, and bad reputation. Clearly, should I be an investor, I would not bring money here.
This card you gave me, is this, you have an email on this?
Yes, I put you my direct
okay,
email.
I will send it to you.
Bohdan at Yaremenko.ws.
Yeah, in behalf of my good friend, my godfather. I appreciate it.
Why you decided to get baptized?
Well,
in
you know,
such a mature.
Well, that's a good point, you know, because that's what the father asked me, you know. And so I told him, I said, I really believe I was, you know, baptized a Roman Catholic. So, of course, Catholicism has changed. And I like the, you know, the original way, you know, which was the Latin and everything. And so I saw great similarities. And I mean, you know, and so of course my wife is is Ukrainian, and she's Russian Orthodox, you know. So she was taking me, you know, to church on Sunday.
Oh, this is a dilemma. I'm scheduling this again, so for you just to get an understanding of the complicity of foreign policy and internal agenda here, and the links between them. Right now I'm planning my trip back to Istanbul to meet with the ecumenical patriarch.
Oh, really?
Russian Orthodoxy becoming a problem.
Oh, really?
So this is not a church from the
Okay,
ecclesiastical point of view, so this is a corporation.
Yeah.
Corporation which has been used for political aims as well by Russian Federation, and you see it was, well, PR disaster for them, but I'm glad it happened. Last week at the parliament, the president was acknowledging the names. I saw that, I read that. And they didn't even raise, you know, the priest of the church.
Do you know the mayor down at Kherson, by the way?
Sorry?
The mayor?
The mayor?
Kherson? Do you know him?
No.
Well, I interviewed him. Okay. It was really most interesting. And he's such a stout patriot, you know. I asked him one simple thing, because there's a news item, you know, and he was talking about Maidan, Kherson Maidan. And so I went down there and I said, what do you mean by that? And he went, and he talked for 20 minutes on one question, you know, and he was really passionate about it. And of course he got elected last year. And this guy spent 30 years as a senior manager for a mining company. He's quite an interesting guy, you know. So I don't have his, I mean, of course I have his, but I don't remember, you know, the
I don't know.
But anyway.
But well, we have a lot of interesting people here.
Yeah.
That's what we really lacking here is the good system.
Excellent.
An organization. Good people, nice people, smart people.
This is a good beginning. You're a very entrepreneurial, creative guy. I can see that.
Well, we're trying to be, well, we are not a government, we must be creative.